What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone, we got Kyle from Misery Signals here. Great to talk to you, man. Thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, man.
It's so awesome to have you here. The new album, Ultraviolet, coming out this summer, the first Misery Signals record in 7 years since Absent Light. So do you consider this just picking up where you left off after Absent Light, or do you think that this is almost like a new beginning for Misery Signals in a way?
Well, the way that I view this album personally is almost like picking up where we left off after Controller, because Stewart and I left the band after that album and weren't a part of Absent Light, and then we both came back, and obviously Jesse coming back too makes it a little bit of a return to the Malice era. But yeah, kind of less of a picking up after Absent Light and more, I guess, after Controller, I would say, stylistically.
Awesome. Could the first single that you released, The Tempest, almost serve as like a clear representation of what the whole album is going to sound like, or do you think that this is just scratching the surface?
I think that's kind of one of the more, I guess, toned down songs, more accessible, catchy, simple structurally. I think that it definitely does represent a portion of the sound of the new album, but I think there is a lot more going on than you're going to hear in that one track. It's a little bit of everything, I suppose. Like, I think we touch on all of the albums that we've done, and then kind of introduce it, and introduce a new sort of sound as well, all jumbled into one.
As a fan of Misery Signals, I could tell what would be off of Malice in the Magnum Heart, or what's off of Mirrors, or what's off Controller, etc. So is it fair to say that you guys have always tended to like experiment with your sound, or is there still like a formula that you always tried to maintain in the catalog?
I think that there's definitely been a formula throughout the band's career that we have rarely strayed too far from. But at the same time, just as musicians, to keep ourselves interested in what we're doing, we always try and experiment with little things here and there to make sure that each album is kind of a different experience than the last. So maybe a little bit of both, a little bit of definitely keeping in mind that our fans are there for, a reason, and like the music that we've made in the past. So we always try to keep that in mind. But again, like I said, we want to keep ourselves creatively activated as well. So in order to do that, we got to play around a little bit.
Yeah. Is it almost fair to say that maybe every album in the Misery Signals catalog is like representative of who you and Jesse and everybody in the band is at that particular time?
Yeah, I suppose so. Definitely with Malice, that Malice represents a period of time, and a lot of I guess the earlier vibes that we were putting out. I guess if it represents the time of that it existed, like in what we were into musically at that time, and lyrically, it definitely touches on things that were going on during those different eras.
Yeah.
It pretty much is in tune with the year that it came out, I would say.
Yeah, and kind of going back to like experimentation, because just on Malice alone, I know we're promoting the new album here, but just going back to Malice, you have you have songs with a lot of collaborations on it. You have an instrumental song, so it almost just seems like there's really no element of being dictated with songwriting, right? You just write whatever you feel at that very moment.
Absolutely, yeah. That's really where it all begins. It starts with a guitar riff or a drum line or whatever it may be, and whoever creates that is how they're feeling at that moment, and we just kind of roll with it from there and develop it into what it becomes ultimately.
Being that Ultraviolet features the return of Jesse and the return of you, and it almost is there maybe kind of like a party like it's 2004 sort of vibe in a way behind it?
Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia surrounding this album, because of the return of certain members, and especially Jesse being gone for 15 years, 16 years from the last time that he was on a Misery Signals album. I think that a lot of the focus is on him because of that, and we realize how important it is to the fans that appreciated that album and prefer that era of Misery Signals. So we're trying not to put too much focus on that because it is a new album and it is 2020 and not 2004. But at the same time, it's pretty hard to avoid. And we're not trying to avoid it intentionally. We respect that era of the band, and we're happy that Jesse was able to come back and help us create something that we're very excited about and proud of.
Mm-hmm. Was there at all maybe like a preconceived idea of what you wanted Ultraviolet to sound like, or was there kind of like a lot of improvising involved?
Honestly, I think we started writing material in 2016, maybe even late 2015 for this album.
Oh, wow.
So we have songs that have been sitting there for 5 years that we've have gone over so many times and retweaked and whatnot. So like I said before, I think that it's always on our mind a little bit to try and create something that our older fans can relate to and get behind. But then again, at the same time, like I said, when you spread the writing process over 5 years, you're gonna get all kinds of stuff for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah,
and then you just have to try and put it together.
Yeah, like when this album comes out this summer, are what we going to be hearing? Like, was this almost kind of like the first initial take of what these songs originally were, or did the songs change a lot over a period of time?
Both. There are a couple tracks that didn't really shift too much over the writing process, and then there are other ones that if I played you a demo of the first version, you wouldn't even recognize it. It's completely different. So it's just really just a matter of, I guess, how we felt when we were wrapping things up, and like I said, a song that we wrote 5 years ago that we had to wrap up, a few months before going into the studio. It just might, some of the songs didn't represent what we're trying to do now musically as what we were doing 5 years ago. So, we just made changes where necessary, just to kind of make us happy in the end.
You ever worried the original way you wrote it or the demo will be a B-side one day, just be the biggest hit you guys ever had?
Yeah, I doubt that'll happen. I doubt that we'll ever see the light of day, to be honest with you, but you never know, I guess.
Never say never. Never say never. Yeah. You have some dedicated fans, so I imagine they want to hear every aspect of it, regardless of how off it could be.
Yeah, and if the demand grows for that, then, maybe it will rear its ugly head one day, some of those demos.
Yeah, I'll give an extra boost when I post this interview just to see if that happens at all. Another thing I was really curious about is kind of deviating from the songwriting, but you guys have toured with like a variety, because you guys are a very heavy band, but like you've toured with like a variety of bands, like touring with a band like After the Burial or Veil of Maya or Darkest Hour seems appropriate. But correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't My Chemical Romance open up for you guys like a long time ago?
It never actually ended up happening. They were supposed to be the opener on our first tour. We did I think it was like 9 or 10 days with Every Time I Die, and that was our first, not our first shows, but our first actual tour.
Oh, wow.
And I can't remember what the reason being. I can't remember why they had to cancel, but yeah, it was something that was supposed to happen, but it never actually did.
Okay.
And then obviously they went on to do crazy big things after that.
But is it fair to say, like, depending on like the tours that you're on, maybe you've noticed like a different reaction to your music, or do you maybe sometimes like adjust the set list depending on the tours that you're on?
I think both are true. Depending on the tour, we definitely try to play material that may reach out to the fan base of the band that we're supporting. That's definitely been the case a lot of the time, but not always. I suppose it just depends on the tour and the bands that we're with. If we're headlining, then that plays less of a factor. At that step, we're trying to just create a set that our fans would want to hear. But yeah, if we're supporting some larger act with a fan base that might be different than our fan base, then we're trying to bridge the gap and win over new fans. So a lot of times we will cater to that crowd just to hopefully grow our fan base.
Yeah, and I've noticed like even your headliner tours are kind of like diverse too, because like doing a tour with a band like the Agony Scene, but also like having a Mirror on the same bill. That's like yeah. So when you headline, you can almost bring out anybody you want.
Yeah, it's been diverse throughout our career. I think we've toured with every kind of band that kind of comes close to our genre, and I mean that's kind of how we prefer it be as well. I mean, we have to be on the tour night after night, so we would prefer to be with bands that we enjoy, that don't sound like a carbon copy of ourselves, that we can stand side stage and watch each night, and also, draw creative influence from, like, just because we've been around forever and are old, it doesn't mean that we're not listening to newer bands and learning from what they're doing now. Bands like Counterparts and Knock Loose, and bands that we once influenced now are influencing us.
That's awesome to hear. And yeah, so many people have been inspired by you guys. So
yeah, and I mean that's something that it's always been very humbling to hear when bands approach us and tell us this. Even bands that we look at and consider to be better musicians than us and better in a lot of other ways. It's very flattering, coming from people like that.
Yeah. When it comes to playing live, is there maybe a similar energy into playing material live as you are when you're songwriting, or is songwriting and playing live almost just a completely separate entity altogether?
I would say it's pretty separate. It's a completely different experience altogether. That might not have been the case always. I think maybe when we were a younger band, or even the band prior to Misery Signals that Ryan and I were in, I think the writing experience and the live energy kind of worked hand in hand. You know what I'm saying? Like, we could recreate that energy in a jam space. I think mostly because we were younger and we were, I guess, just so excited about what we were doing and so passionate about it. And that's not to say that we lost that passion, but it just kind of, I guess it takes on a new form the older you get. And so when we're in the studio or in the jam space writing, just the approach is just different than it would have been 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. After doing it for so long.
Yeah, you do it so much, it almost becomes like a second nature in a way, right? It's almost like brushing your teeth. You don't even think about it. You just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's with anything in life, right?
Yeah, of course, especially when you do it so much.
Yeah.
Yep. I kind of want to go back in time a little bit, turn back the clock a little bit to kind of like the formation of Misery Signals, because, correct me if I'm wrong, you used to be in Seven Angels, Seven Plagues, right?
Yeah. Me and Ryan were both in that one.
Yeah.
And Jesse was he was the vocalist at the very end as well before we split.
Oh, wow. So was kind of like it during the formation of Misery Signals to kind of like take what you learned from that previous project and kind of morph it into something similar, or did you guys want to do something you never did before?
Both. I mean, we literally took 2 or 3 tracks from Seven Angels EP that we were working on and turned those into the first Misery Signal songs.
Really?
Yes. The Year Summer Ended in June, Like Yesterday, and Dream Atlantic were all, in some form, they all started as Seven Angels songs. And we I guess, modified them quite extensively to the point where you could, if you listen to the Seven Angels demos, you'd recognize certain parts, but, I mean, the songs were completely restructured, and a lot more was added to them, because they were still kind of early in the process before Seven Angels broke up. So yeah, I mean, that, I guess early on when we were writing, that's kind of where it started, I guess. We wanted to pick up where we left off, and at the same time there were certain elements of Seven Angels that we wanted to kind of move away from as well. So we just kind of, I guess, did our best to make our own thing while using, something that we'd already created.
Yeah, a lot of people have referred to Misery Signals as part of the metalcore movement, and I don't know how you feel about that title. Some artists embrace it, some despise that term altogether. I don't know where you stand with it in a way.
I mean, I've accepted it over the years. I don't mind it. If you really break it down for what it is, we are, we can be considered a metal band or a hardcore band. So I guess a combination of the two makes sense. But at the same time, we put a lot of focus on melody and, clean parts and things that go beyond, I guess, heavy or beyond metalcore.
Yeah.
So, metalcore to me, I'm okay with the terminology, but at the same time, I feel like we have more to offer than just your traditional straightforward metalcore band would.
Definitely. I considered Controller to pretty much be progressive metal at that point. Just when you hear the end of Parallels or something like that, or the end of Reset or even Homecoming, I just see absolute progressive elements in there too. So
yeah, I think you have to give a band a generic genre term. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has to be attached to something, but like I said, whether we're a metalcore band or a hardcore band or whatever you want to call us, we've always made an effort to be something different that other bands weren't doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always on the front of the list of I guess what we were trying to do when we were writing. Obviously we have influences like anybody else, but I guess the challenge is taking those influences and trying to create something unique out of it. And that, I guess, has always kind of been what we aspired to do.
Yeah, I still to this day don't really understand what metalcore means. Obviously, I'm thinking of Killswitch Engage and As I Lay Dying and All That Remains and stuff. But
sure.
People, I ask people, what is metalcore? And they say, oh, it's music that has singing and screaming. And I'm like, so does that make Fear Factory or Opeth or Soilwork metalcore?
Yeah, see, I wouldn't agree with that. I personally don't think that singing really plays into it at all. To me, it's just a mixture of hardcore and metal, and bands that were doing that in the late 90s and early 2000s, such as the bands that I was in, hardcore bands that started to, I guess, introduce more metal elements or vice versa. And that's all it's ever been to me. And I'm not the one who invented the term, so.
Yeah. Well,
but, it's just all, I guess, up to, it's all in the eye of the beholder, right?
Definitely. And I spoke with Campbell from Lamb of God, and he told me I had this discussion with him. I never understood how one could hate metal and love hardcore and vice versa. To me, they both seem very aggressive and very honest forms of music, right?
Yeah.
So
I agree. And a band like that, I would consider Lamb of God to just be metal, straight metal. I don't hear. Of course, there's similarities in what they do to some hardcore stuff, but to me, they come off as more straight metal band in my eyes. A band like Comeback Kid would be a good example of what I would consider to be a metalcore band.
Yeah.
Because
don't you work with them too?
I do, yeah. And they, to me, they have a lot of straightforward hardcore stuff, and they experiment with more metal-based stuff as well. So, by definition, I guess a band like that would fall under that category to me. Even if more leaning towards hardcore, I would still, there's still elements of metal going on for sure.
Definitely. I have two more questions for you. But when it comes to the songwriting, this is always the most difficult question of the interview. Are you ready?
Sure.
How do you know when a song is done?
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard to know a lot of the times. Oh, and then sometimes you just know right away. There's really there's no way to know for sure. A lot of the time you go into the studio with a few tracks that you're uncertain about, and you start recording them, and once you start to hear the song with a proper recording, it just changes the whole vibe entirely. You know what I mean? Like a song that you might not really be that stoked on, but other people are, so you stick with it. Once you record it and you get a final version of it, you ask yourself why you ever doubted it in the first place. And then there's other songs that you go into the studio feeling super confident about, and they don't turn out to be as good as you thought they would. So, I mean, a lot of it's just a crapshoot. You know, you don't really know for sure. You just kind of take the plunge with each song and hope for the best.
Yeah, I feel like. I mean, oh, you're saying?
Fortunately for us, it's worked out. It's worked out for the most part. You know, there aren't many Misery Signal songs that I personally feel were complete flops. But you know, that could be different for my other bandmates. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I feel like every time you release a song, it's almost like releasing the dice. You just.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to be received, and that's not obviously everything. But you want people to enjoy what you're doing. Otherwise, why are you doing it, right?
Of course. And the final question I wanted to ask you is, you guys originated, I know you guys aren't really based there anymore, but you guys originated in Milwaukee, right?
We originated in Wisconsin. So Brandon and Ryan are from Madison, and I'm from a city called Racine, which is about 35 minutes south of Milwaukee.
Okay.
So we, at the time that we were in Seven Angels, is when we made the transition, and me, Ryan, and Matt Mixon moved to Milwaukee and got a place together. And then I guess when Misery Signals formed, me and Ryan were living in Milwaukee still. Brandon was in Madison, and Jesse and Stu. Well, Jesse had kind of moved down from Canada, but not really. Like, he would still go home after tours. But yeah, I mean, I guess if we had to pick some place where we would call home, it would have to be Milwaukee and Edmonton.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to pick one or the other. You know, there's so much importance between the two.
Yeah, well, I've interviewed Jungle Rot numerous times, who originated in Milwaukee, and they said, even though that's where they're from, they've always said Chicago was really like their home turf in a way, because it was so close, and then, like, you know, November's Doom is from Wisconsin, and so many great bands are from, like, that region. Like, was there kind of like an active scene that Misery Signals cut their teeth in, or was the initial goal to just get outside your state lines as quick as possible?
Well, I think with Seven Angels, we were more actively involved in the local scene, because at that point we were all from Wisconsin, and so we were going to shows as well as playing shows. And then, you know, we were in the process of taking Seven Angels to the next level and starting to tour more extensively and kind of move away from the local and more to the international and whatnot. But with Misery Signals, it was kind of tricky, because, like I said, you know, half of us were Canadian and half were from Milwaukee. So the Canadians, they weren't spending time in Milwaukee. So only half the band was at that point. And so a lot of the times we were meeting in some, like, neutral area to start a tour. And, you know, if we came through Milwaukee, cool, but, you know, it wasn't like a stop that we would hit on every tour. So we kind of made the shift once Seven Angels broke up and Misery Signals started, from more of a local based band to just straight touring. Like, we just played wherever. Didn't matter where we were from at that point.
Awesome.
I mean, it mattered where we were from, but you know what I mean. Like, our goal was to just play shows wherever the fuck we could.
Yeah, you weren't a dictated East Coast or West Coast hardcore band. You were right in the middle, so you were neutral.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Is there just anything else? Obviously, you know, thanks to a certain virus that shall not be named. But is there? I'd imagine when all this is over, we could be seeing you on the road quite a bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's unfortunate that it worked out the way that it did, because we had a lot of stuff planned for this year, but. You know, what's the difference between being 40 and 41 and going on tour? I guess we'll just do it next year.
Yeah.
Or hopefully later in the year. We still have some stuff that we're holding out hope for in November, December, but like I said, as time goes on, it seems less and less likely that anything's going to happen in 2020.
Yeah, screw this year, right?
Yeah, it's a write-off.
Yeah. Hey, at least when the decade starts off this bad, that means it can't get any worse, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get it out of the way early.
Yeah, I just totally jinxed it now, probably. But anyway, but thank you so much again for your time today. Everybody, we are here with Kyle of Misery Signals, Ultraviolet, coming out this August. Be sure to pick it up then. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.